Okay, good morning, colleagues. Good morning. Okay. We apologize for starting a bit late. We understood that some people, as they're driving, especially those coming from Pretoria, there was a... Okay, can you hear me now? Hello? Good, okay. Okay, I was saying, we apologize for the late start. There were some problems on the road with some accidents for those that are coming from Pretoria, but we are excited that we are here in this launch, and I hope you are as excited as us as we give birth to this new baby. Let's call it a new baby within the NSG. We want to welcome all our guests that have traveled to come and be with us today. We're grateful for your presence, and we also want to acknowledge those that are joining us online. I'm sure the ones that are looking after the online people, that you can see them, they are there. So we're grateful for you to join as well. So today we're launching the executive education portfolio of the National School of Government. So as the NSG, you've seen those that have been with us over the years, you've seen that we've been evolving and changing the things that we do. And we're excited that we, over the last couple of years, from 2020, we started introducing courses that were relevant and with high impact for the executives. And we started launching them. We have courses like the Economic Governance School, ETELA, and so on. These are high impact courses. And today we just want to give some publicity to those courses so that everyone is aware of them and know how to access them. So it is a privilege to be here with you, and we are excited to be launching the programs, and we want you to create a vibe with us as you share what you would learn about these programs when you go back to your organizations and you tell them what is the NSG doing, how we are reinventing ourselves, especially trying to take care of our leaderships. This is not the only courses that we do. There is courses as well that we do for the other levels, but just for today, we are focusing on the executives. So we do have courses that talks to the boards of directors as well for public entities. We have ones that look at DGs, DDGs, and so on. So we want you to be aware of these programs because they will change the way you do your work. We want your executives in your organization to participate and enroll on these courses because it will improve their work and make it easier for them to be able to deliver on their mandates. For now, I would like to welcome our principal, Professor Busani Ngabweni, to the stage to then speak to us more about the programs and the vision of the executive education. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to you who are here and those who are joining us online. It's great to have you here. We do have another group of people who will be making their way here. They're finalizing a conference that began yesterday on knowledge management. They will be coming over here, as well as those who are joining us virtually. We acknowledge the colleagues from the public sector who are here, who represent various organizations, especially those responsible for HRD. In your organizations, we also acknowledge colleagues who represent higher education. We will explain to you why what we are doing today is significant for expanding the relationships we have with the higher education institutions. That's why people like Professor Masrumule is here in his various capacities, also as someone who's been assisting us to finalize the professionalization framework, but also now that he's in the planning commission, it means that we have someone in the commission who also understands the type of work that we do as the NSG. I'll run through a quick PowerPoint presentation, and there's someone somewhere who's putting that PowerPoint presentation up. I wished I had something to control it here myself so that I can dictate the pace. But as they are projecting the presentation, just to indicate a few things, COVID was I will say, a blessing in a way for the National School of Government, in a sense that it allowed us to do a few things. One, as a partially self-funding government department, COVID meant that we had no revenue during alert levels 5 and 3. That is because majority of the programs that the NSG does were programs that were done face-to-face. Now, as you can understand, with the suspension of all interactions since that period, it meant that we were unable to bring students into the NSG to generate revenue. In fact, there were instances where just as we were about to organize classes and go back to interactive sessions, the alert level was changed and we had to cancel classes and bookings, and some people got stranded in various provinces. So there were options. Option one was for NSG to wait and go and beg cabinet and treasury to change our funding model and give us a bailout, or we had to have a step change within the organization. And I say it was a blessing in its disguise, in a sense that COVID forced the NSG to go back to the drawing board, to innovate and identify ways and means at which we can carry on our business, provide the core service, which is training in the public sector, and of course raise revenue, but also understanding the environment we are in. We had to provide new types of training programs into the public sector employees, because you couldn't be doing what we have been doing over the past 10 years. The post-COVID era requires a new type of thinking and skills amongst public servants, and the programs that we are launching are but one step towards helping us do that. Fortunately, we had the support of the EU, which is acknowledged. It's coming to an end this month. In fact, we have a closing session next week with our partner, the EU. So we're able to draw some of the residual resources that were still available there to be able to drive some of the programs that we are launching today. And that is why in the poster behind me, we're still acknowledging the EU with people like Salim, who represent the EU, as well as others. Now, this is where we are as the NSG. The picture looks different now because there's a construction happening there in our courtyard. But we hope many of you have been there, or you will continue to come. Who is controlling for me? Please follow my pace. So you'll understand, colleagues, that with the sixth administration deciding that building ethical, capable, and developmental state is the #1 priority, this puts a lot of pressure on the NSG, but it also opened up opportunities for us in a sense that we became part of a national agenda. So a government department that was small, obscure, somewhere like in the mix, like everybody else, suddenly became part of the national agenda. And that is why since that period, in every other state of the nation address, the National School of Government gets mentioned in many budget votes. It gets mentioned in cabinet statements. It also gets mentioned because we are key in driving this agenda. And when we say we are key, and refer to NSG, I'm referring to all of you because you are all an extension of the NSG, given the responsibilities you carry in your institutions. We provide training solutions to your institutions because of you who are our conduit, because of you who understand the product that we deliver, also because of you, because you give us feedback, which force us to go back and make the necessary changes. And so this is how we need to be seen. So when you see the NSG being mentioned a lot publicly, it's because the decision to make building a capable state a number one priority put the NSG in the forefront of this program. There is a few slides that talk about us, and you can read more about some of them. But this slide is really to emphasize the rationale for the type of program that we are launching today. For many of you and everybody in the state and outside the state, COVID-19, brought a lot of challenges to public sector institutions, and you had to find ways and means of innovating in order to sustain the business that you are doing. And these are some of the things that we saw people do during that period. We saw an increased use of technology. In fact, many of people who didn't know about anything called MS Teams, they started using Teams and Zoom and many other digital platforms. This meant that all of us can be here, have this interaction, and there are people who are engaging with us, virtually, and because it's a cheaper way of doing this type of, video conferencing. It also saw even cabinet itself not being able to physically meet, but to sustain, having interactions using digital platforms. I make an argument that there is no time than during COVID where we saw government communicate. The last time we saw government communicate as much was during 2010 FIFA World Cup. And this, because I was part of the organizing system, I can draw parallels between how every minister, every department was communicating during that period and how they communicated during the COVID era as well. And it was necessary that they had to do so. So this is one of the things that we saw emerge. I mean, of course, there are other, matters arising from it. People argue that we could have done better in this instance. And so some of the causes that we are designing are precisely made to respond to that. The response around the responsive governance and social arrangement is very important. So one of the programs that we are talking about today is a program on IGR and DDM and how to use those as effective instrument of inclusive planning and implementation. During this period of the national lockdowns, every time a decision had to be made about opening up or closing, even now there were stories that there were meetings with the premiers and the mayors of metros and so on. I spent 15 years at the presidency. Meetings of the PCC often happen twice a year, and they were very difficult meetings to organize. With COVID, they had to happen sometimes every 3 weeks, because decision had to be made rapidly. So an institution called the Presidential, Coordinating, Council had to be reconfigured, could be convened at a 24-hour turnaround time. Prior to that, it took 6 weeks to convene that type of a meeting. And it is a lesson. So some of the work we are doing to redesign the causes around IGR and DDM are precisely so that we build capabilities amongst ourselves as public sector employees, elected and appointed, to effectively use some of these instruments available to us that often take long. In fact, the challenge for foresight, for cabinet, is if we were able to change regulations as quick as we could. Sometimes there's a regulation on closing alcohol with immediate effect. It affected many of you, today with immediate effect. Why is it that people are asking, why is it that you can't have a regulation that, for example, might say we are closing the sale of scrap metals with immediate effect? Because that's an instrument available to the state if you declare an emergency, because there is people are destroying public property as they are searching for money by selling copper cables and so on. So you and us as public servants and those that we are providing support to need to go back into the simulator, which is the type of programs we are offering ourselves and in partnership with universities, so that they are able to go to their own principals and say, if during COVID we could make a decision to close alcohol with immediate effect, Why will it take 7 months to write a regulation to scrap the sale of scrap metals? And by the time you do so, you will have wiped out almost a significant percentage of PRASA. So this is the type of training programs that we are talking about here. And that's why we say we learned that it is imperative that we look at how the policy instruments were used in the most agile manner during this period. Now, in the end, what are we hoping for? And the jury is out. So those of you in organizations who are responsible for M&E and impact in your own institutions need to be able to take some of these into account. Is it possible that we can train a new cadre of public servant who will be committed, diligent, prudent, ethical, masterful, and innovative? Innovative in a sense that we can make an example. SASSA, during level 5, was asked to distribute 350 grant during level 5. It meant that people could not go to SASSA offices to apply for 350. Remember, it was levels 4 and 5. They had to go back into the drawing board and search deeply in their innovation, in their veins, for bids and trades of innovation, to the extent that SASSA, during levels 5 and levels 5 and 3, they were able to distribute, to process 14 million applications, and they were able to pay up to 6 million, those that were approved, without any applicant setting foot at a SASSA office. Should I repeat that? They were able to process 14,000 applications, granted 6 million, without anyone going to apply in an office. They use the most basic of technologies available: WhatsApp, email, and SMS. Remember, many of us who are here, even our grandparents who earn social grants, they know how to buy airtime because we have taught them to do *12*#, and so on. They know, majority of them. Even those who don't know, the majority of them already, 95% of SASSA beneficiaries get their money through the card. So it's an electronic payment, they don't queue. So with the people who are applying for 350, although in a chart that shows the type of mobile phones they use, you can see the iPhone is number 2 and so on. So others were using cell phones from family and friends. These are people who were able to upload their ID number and other details by sharing, because on social media platforms like WhatsApp, people are sharing pictures and videos every day, including in a pension pay point. But here we're talking in the majority about the able, and majority were men, because the initial regulations were that you don't get the 350 if you already earning another grant, like a child support grant and so on. That's why the majority of them were men. So that may look like an insignificant anecdote, unless you were part of the 6 million people who received 350 without having to set foot in a SASSA office to queue to make an application. Those who queue at the post office is those who don't have bank accounts. So SASSA then was able to use that very basic technologies available to process these, and less than 300,000 of them were found to be fraudulent. But as they were building system, they were able to detect. The issue is that some of it's very expensive to recover 350, so it may take a while to do so. So when we talk about training for people to be innovative, we're not saying that you turn your department into a laboratory at CSIR, but indeed you can turn your own directorate into a laboratory of ideas in order to solve the most basic of problems where you are. And that is what the training that we are talking about need to result into. Now, you were the only government department that has a vision that is directly aligned to a national priority in the MTSF. They use me as a mascot because of popular issues, so which is fine. We don't have to seek permission from anyone to do that. So this is just the basics about the NSG. Now, this is an important slide because some people think, what is this National School of Government now? Some think it's something that was an invention during COVID. Certainly during COVID, we were able to use the fact that many of you were at home and we were bombarding you with messages. So people became aware of us because they were interacting with the news and media and consuming a lot of content during COVID. But this is how these institutions has evolved over the years. Partly because of these many name changes, it's difficult for people to know what is the National School of Government. So part of the work we're doing now is this rebranding. We have no intention of changing the name of the NSG, and we have told the leadership as such that there is no intention of making any name changes from what it is. We've got to be, stable for people to be able to make a relationship. But this is how it has evolved there over the years. And what we are doing today is to launch something that takes us to the next level. So this is our mandate as founded in law. It's being reconsolidated now through the amendments to the Public Service Act, as well as PAMA. We will not discuss it in detail today, but you'll be happy to know that as prescribed in law, the National School of Government is now designing full qualifications, as in a postgraduate diplomas, as well as a level 6 certificate as well. And through the relationship with universities, there are conversations we're having about how to systematize interventions around RPL, because there's a bigger opportunities there as well. Now, the significant thing, because we are all practitioners of ETD in one way or the other, is that we are urging that in the programs you buy, whether you recommend that people buy a training program from a private provider, from a university of technology or the NSG or anywhere else, it is important that you must ask yourself whether the training that people are buying, once we have gone through that experience, does it help those who have gone through that experience to put the citizen at the center of it? Because you can learn as a learner, the state suddenly has got qualified people, but where is the citizen in all of this? So the citizen has to be at the center of the type of programs that we all do. So this is our value proposition, as it were. Here, it's significant for you to know, so you are able to make linkages and connect with why we are working with higher education institutions locally and globally. We provide ETD solutions directly, that is to people ourselves as the NSG, using our own internal capabilities. But we also thought it is important for us to influence. Now, you colleagues as ETD practitioners, some of you sit as chairs of bursary committees. So a lot of money is spent on bursaries and so on. You then have these people coming back who are now well decorated, and they remind you in every meeting that I've got an MBA, I've got a master's. They remind you know what's happened. But then you don't see any impact or change in the work in that particular space, in spite of the fact that the organization has spent millions on bursaries and so on. So this thing of influence is important to the extent that the state, which spends 4 billion on training and development annually, is not, as an employer, is not influencing the agenda of training and development and the type of training programs that are being offered into those. By the way, our share as NSG before COVID was only 120 million of 4 billion. That's our share. The rest of it, most of you spend it in higher education or in private training providers. Almost most of you, when you train project management, you go to one-man shows, one-woman show type of organization, and you spend millions there. Only 120 in total comes to the NSG. And lastly, this issue of referring. It's a very significant thing, because once you understand that there are colleagues who are unable to perform a particular function and so on, and you don't immediately have a type of a training interventions that you can provide, we are making an argument that we need to know where to refer. So if in your organization, you got 50 drivers and the recurrence of accidents, so you realize that there is a problem with the ability of these drivers to drive safely and so on. You don't have a driving training academy. The NSG doesn't, neither does transport. That is where then the issue of referring, where you need to know where can we refer these people to be trained so that they can safely drive stage vehicles. And I'm making this as an example. It's also an issue even at much higher levels among stages and so on. There will be those things that they are unable to do, which you can't immediately provide yourself or through ourselves or higher education institutions, and we must know where to refer that matter to. And importantly, we've changed our operating model. We work in partnership with higher education institutions and not in competition, because there is no need for us to compete, but rather to collaborate. This is important for you to note that we've reorganized the NSG, we've changed the structure and so on. Fortunately, we went through a successful restructuring process internally. We now have got these 4 faculties. Now, this experiment in the end may prove to have some limitations which can be amended because it's an internal arrangement. But basically the idea is for you to note that at the NSG, and we will put up the colleagues there at the end, we'll put up the faces of the faculty leaders here so you know who they are together with the contact details. The first one, which is cadets and foundational development. And there are also many colleagues who are supposed to be here, not here, because there's a train the trader happening at Birchwood with 90 ETD practitioners from government departments across the country who are responsible for delivering the compulsory induction program for low levels employees. They are in the train the trainer program right now. That is why they are not in this room or even in the virtual platform. But we're basically saying, because even the Public Service Act, for those who operate in that space, specify what type of vocational and technical abilities that people at entry levels need to have. We must have a dedicated focus towards supporting those, so that you must make them thrive in what they do, whether they are frontline officers. At Home Affairs, they must know how to operate a harness system effectively. And at SASA is the same thing, and so is the case in many other institutions. But even there are people who are working in the, teachers and nurses and so on, who are at levels below level 7, level 6 in many institutions. And so we look at what are the dedicated programs that must be delivered there. One of them is excellence, in customer service, because these are the people who are dealing with clients and the members of the public on a daily basis, including issues of anti-discrimination. Because in many cases, a young pregnant girl goes into a front line to apply for a grant. People are looking at her and they say, you got pregnant because you wanted a grant. And so they don't know the circumstance. She could even have been raped. Or she goes into the police station and they look at her and they ask you, what were you wearing? We know the Minister of Police has been talking about some of these things. So these are very important programs, because the majority of those people who are in the entry level are the ones who are in the call phase of delivery with the public. So we've got programs designed for it, including those who will be retiring in 5 years' time, who don't have any certificate, who need to be given that because they want to self-actualize. They will have spent 30 years in the public service. They've got another 7 years to go. They have nothing else. And so you, by helping them, put them through a learnership successfully, and they will be able to self-actualize, and they will retire from the public service being proud people. Remember, the motto of the NSG is learn, serve, grow. So the idea is that people must learn so that they can effectively serve, but also they must grow. Yes, we are grow professionally, but also in terms of self-actualization. The next one, which is led by Soraya, it's a middle management and development. As you know, in many, many institutions, once you are in middle management, you command so much power. You are a supervisor, especially in the frontline, environment. In the police, we are called colonel. We now have a rank, no longer constable and these other funny titles. We're now a colonel in the police. You command much superior power. You sign for leave for many people. In some instances, you sit in bid committees and so on. And that's very important because the first and the second faculty are actually preparing the leadership of the future. So the type of foundation that you build there, the confidence, the discipline, the ethics will determine what will happen later on, because these are the people who will be leading public sector institutions. And then Louise, who is in senior management and professional development, it's very important. If you studied law and you wanted to be admitted as an attorney or an advocate, or studied town planning, you want to be registered or recognized as a town planner, or you started accounting, you want to register with any of the global accounting qualification other than SICA, because people think it's only CA. There's a variety of them that you can affiliate with. That's the level at which that must come to fruition if it didn't come before. Very unlikely that you can become a registered engineer once you reach the DDG level. It means that a lot of steps will have been missed. So even in the professionalization framework that we are working on, that's the theory. Of course, many people ideally should achieve that at a middle management level, but once you reach senior management, it's got to consolidate. We must always remember, in public administration, if we exclude local government and SOEs, there is 1.2 million people who are employed there. Of the 1.2 million people employed there, minus those who are on OSD, there is only 9,400 who are at SMS. That means people who earn R1 million plus. So there's a million people, 1.2 million people, they are supervised by 9,400 people. So that faculty is important because in my own estimation, 50% of the crisis of the public service is as a consequence of the 9,400 people not doing their work, not managing. Many teachers and HODs make an argument that during COVID, the people who were most likely to be available when they were called were middle and junior managers, even outside of the front line. And that senior managers had stories consistently. In fact, I met an HOD recently who told me that they haven't met. They haven't met since March 2020. And of course, we do know that during that period, some of those senior managers were running their own businesses and so on. So it's a very key in terms of dealing with issues of values and leadership and so on, because people move there from being chief directors to becoming DDGs and then DGs or MMs and so on in the local government space. And most of the problems we see happening at the level of the executive is a consequence of neglect downstream. So this is how we have now organized the faculties. The last one is also a very weighty one in a sense that we're also training politicians, elected officials, and so on. And of course, there's many programs that are cross-cutting, and you'll see a few of them very quickly now in the next slide. So I hope all of you know this, you've done them. These are compulsory programs of the NSG that are done online. Please do them. If you have any query, please drop a line. We have to make sure that everybody does these courses by the end of this term because they are compulsory. Fortunately, you don't have to pay for them. So anyone in the public sector, elected and appointed, can do them. Now, these are important flagship ones, as I mentioned earlier on this example, that the daily experience of poor people in South Africa is a daily experience that is of, sometimes humiliation. That if you are a young Black woman and poor and you get pregnant and you live in an informal settlement, this is the type of stuff that you will be going through. They will humiliate you in a clinic, they will humiliate you at SASA, they will humiliate you at the police station and everywhere else that you go. Because the question is, what were you wearing? Oh, you are pregnant again. It's your second one. Oh, you were here just 2 years ago, and so on. And I mean, someone was telling me that even some of the public hospitals, they've turned their maternity wards into sausage machine because it's now like C-section, because it's quicker, because they are trying to deal with the load that they see. So these causes on anti-discrimination and leading change are important for for transformation and inclusion in the public sector. And please note, these are not causes for women. These are causes for everybody in the public sector, elected and appointed. And of course, these ones are key for dealing with issues of procurement. In my estimation, many of us in our institution need to be sending everybody in SCM back into the drawing board, because the changes that are happening in the compliance environment is moving faster than the training we are giving to our SCM practitioners. So what the AG expects with all the changes that come to the fore is moving at a more rapid pace than the extent to which we are supporting people who are in that in that environment. So whether or not we are getting clean audits, it is prudent that we make this investment in order for people to understand. More so because in supply chain, in the public sector, actually, what we call supply chain means managing a tendering process. In the private sector, it means something else. So as a consequence, a head of supply chain in government, in the private sector, you'll actually just be a very junior official, because in the private sector, you need to understand the entire product cycle. You understand the prices, you know how to negotiate, you understand the market and where things are sourced. And that is why you can negotiate to put your product in a particular aisle. That's part of an entire value chain. That is why companies will know that we are only in this organization sleeping in this hotel group, not because we like it, but because they give us the best discounts. So they go for where there is value and not necessarily where it is, easier and convenient. So do bring them back into the system. We also do programs with international institutions, as you can see, with the Chinese and with INSP in Paris, and we do these courses virtually, which means that we now deliver a program with some of the best scholars across the world. You don't have to travel there because those things are done virtually. In fact, in a week time, we've got another program with the China Africa Institute, which is meant to train local government officials. It's a 2-week program done on Zoom. It's sponsored. It only costs 3,000 rands, which means we can massify instead of sending people to Beijing for that type of a program, or to New York or London or any other institution. Now, very briefly about this, we're finalizing the professionalization framework. It's going to cabinet. I think it's been shifted now to July. These colleagues, we need to take note of it, because once it's approved by cabinet, we're all responsible for it. And if you are a provider, it also opens business opportunities, this framework. Business opportunities in the sense that we're recommending changes to the recruitment and selection processes, which will include amending what is called SMS competency test. Those of you SMS, you've been there to write that competency assessment. The flaw with it, I wrote it in 2020 for the second or third time. The flaw with it is that even as I was writing it to be a DG, there was no difference between it and what I wrote when I was writing it to become a chief director in DDG. I mean, I don't think that it's told anybody anything about my suitability. Even if it did, it was not used as a basis of designing my own personal development plan. So it's just malicious compliance. We all do it. There's a private companies who administer it. You are HR practitioners, you sign for everybody to go there. Some of the changes include recommending that the assessment that is being done must include occupation-specific suitability test, so that we can check whether or not, even if you have a master's in finance or accounting, are you really suitable to become a CFO? Because that thing doesn't make that type of a test or an assessment. So those are some of the recommendations being made, including designing and implementing integrity tests at recruitment and selection. So we are narrowing the eye of the needle at a very early stage in order to predetermine the quality later on. For the induction and onboarding, we arguing that just like in other best and big organizations, there's got to be induction and onboarding, which must be effective, because you can come from a private sector being a best engineer, head of engineering design, you become a DDG in the public sector. Tomorrow, you are chairing a bid committee. There's a R1 billion budget that must be spent. You know, we are commissioning a R1 billion project. You have never in your life read any rules about bid committees. You have never read fully the PFMA and all relevant prescribed regulations and so on. You might even make a mistake, not because you wanted to steal money, but precisely because of the poor or the weak induction. Even when someone moves from department A to B, or even from position A to C, it is important that you do that type of induction and onboarding, because the level of responsibilities is increasing. Planning and performance management is also important. In the private sector, they do this. There's a lot to learn from us. And then that's one, continuing learning and professional development means public servants, like pilots, they must return to the simulator. The NSG is too small to want to claim that it can train everybody. So universities are key in this regard. If cabinet approves this, it means a lot more as a policy intent of public servants must return to school as part of their continuing learning and professional development. In some sectors, people earn EDP points for going back to school to do short courses and so on. And once you institutionalize this across the system, it means many more public servants elected and will have to go back into the system. And lastly, some recommendations on career progression as well. So in a nutshell, this is a summary of the framework. There's a lot more that goes into that is being proposed, including recommending that HR practitioners must belong to a professional body. SCM practitioners, it's now been a recommendation of the Zondo Commission, must belong, somewhere. Finance, as well as the built environment professionals. There are people in the state who NOSD, who don't belong to any professional council, but they N and OSD. And then a level 1 teacher must pay subscription to SACE. A level 1 nurse, auxiliary nurse, social worker must pay subscription to the Health Professionals Council. And there's someone who's an OSD who's earning level 16 salary, who can appear in court but has gotten a master's in law, because it's not recognized by anyone, any of the statutory bodies in the legal profession. And that is partly what this program in this framework aims to achieve. These are our fellows. You know, we thought, colleagues, it's important that we also bring expertise. These are people who volunteer at the National School of Government. As a consequence, it means you can have, when we train DGs, you can now benefit from the fact that you've got former DGs who are fellows of the NSG who are in the classroom available to engage and teach and mentor some of the newer senior managers in the public sector. In the future, we'll be adding people from the private sector as well, because we do need to draw from the expertise from those who come from outside of the public administration, as it were. We run master classes. Prof. Maselemule has done one of those master classes, and there's a series of the master classes that we run. We do encourage you to attend master classes, especially those of you who don't have the discipline of reading books. Master classes help you in the sense that when you have Peter Ho from Singapore, former DG of Foreign Affairs there, former DG of Defense, former DG in the Presidency in Singapore, and he has written a book on complexity. By spending 2 hours with him in a Zoom class, it helps you understand what he wrote in that book. It helps you understand complexity and how to manage it in the public sector. So it spares you, 2 months if it takes you a month to read a book or so, and you learn a lot because it's in an interactive environment. Mariana Mazzucato wrote a book, The Entrepreneurial State on Mission Economy. In the 2 months that she spent in the masterclass, people now understand what she meant when she spoke about the entrepreneurial state. That you as a public servant, you must make decisions that enable opportunities for people you are interfacing with and not to shut down opportunities for the people that you are interacting with. In one of the books on mission economy, she studied the entire decision-making process by government in the US of sending people to space, the first space mission. And by studying it, you can see public servants who were making decisions across various government departments and including local government. And so when they talk about the space mission, the very first one, it was not just those people who are trained as astronauts. Everybody, including the person who cleans the toilets in that government setup, understood that they were adding value. That was the mission that drove all of them. And so by spending that 2 hours, you then have a benefit of being immersed in that conversation. And now, significant, as I said, COVID-19 meant we have fewer interactive classes. We don't think we'll bring everybody back to class, but here is a dilemma. This could be the future for all of us. The reason Prof. Marcel Muller here and other colleagues from higher education institutions who are on the platform, the reason you can't declare that from now on, you are only just a virtual and online institution is because in the public sector, in the frontline space, those people don't have access to computers and data. So you can't train junior officials. Home Affairs, the computers before them, they are configured only to operate a particular system that is providing a service. SARS is the same thing. In the police, in nurses and so on, which means you'll never be able to effectively train frontline service officials using digital platforms. Because even yourselves here, the most junior among some of your own employees in your space, your PAs and so on, some of them don't have access to data. So how then are you expecting them to do a course online and virtually if they don't have a computer? It means whilst they must study there in the class, in the office. And I mean, many organizations, even where I work, I think it's a stupid thing. You can't access YouTube. And so in many of these learning interactive sessions, they will tell you to go and click a YouTube video to learn something, and they don't have access to all of those type of instruments. So whilst this is the future, it's a future more so for these other meeting managers and beyond, and those departments who can organize a class like that one, which is virtual, where we could have 2 classes. So we could have a class here and a class in Cape Town and a class in Mahikeng, and everybody is in a space like this, and those who are teaching are only in one space. That's where you can move people from various regions into the classroom and be able to use digital platforms to transmit. It means the class is bigger, you provide more access. However, you can't just be an online institution completely because you will exclude. Now, here is the big deal for us. We've got over 80 programs, training programs that we offer. Majority of them accredited by various sitters and so on. We are now launching what we call an executive education program. This is where you come in and we are inviting you to join us on this journey of the new National School of Government. And the argument here is simple. The world has changed, so are the demands on us as public sector employees, elected and appointed. And we must remember that because even our political principals will encourage them to return into the simulator as well. In aviation, it's everything there is about planning and decision-making. You plan, you decide, then you execute. That is what aviation is about. There is less room for mistakes there. In aviation, when you are planning a flight as short as Johannesburg to Nelspruit, the planning procedure and requirements are the same as planning a flight to New York. The planning procedure and requirements are consistent regardless of the distance, because they look at all eventualities, which means even yourselves as public servants, when we procure, whether we are procuring $1 billion or we are procuring $1 million, we have to apply exactly the same principles. And we must prepare and train people to be the same. I heard an old man saying the other day on radio that the responsibilities of being married are the same regardless of the type of marriage you entered into. There are no variations, whether it's in community, out of community, traditional, religious. If you remain in it, the obligations of performance are the same. Performing as a married person, as a parent, and so on. Regardless, these other things are in an event that there has to be dissolution. So the nature of marriage, if there's so it's the same in aviation. And the argument we're making is that even in our instances as public servants, we must train ourselves to master the art and craft of execution so that we don't make a mistake because it was only just $1 million project, or it was only just 200 million. So we have to have the same diligence, whether it's a 200 million or whether it is $1 billion, because after all, those are public funds, and by them being wasted, you lose public value. In aviation, if you land an aircraft between here and Nelspruit, the penalties are the same, whether you are crash landing an aircraft from here to Washington. They are the same. Of course, then you must explain and mitigate and what have you, but they say you ought to have known that is why planning matters. And at the end of the day, they say, even ourselves, we cry about being overworked, the Constitution, the AG, and all the pressures that are here in our own hands. In aviation, they face exactly the same. At the end of the day, they must exercise, diligence in the decisions that they make. And so executive education programs are meant to deal with that, regardless of what qualification you may already have. In executive education programs, you'll find highly decorated executives being sent by their employers back into the simulator, because they understand that you must constantly go back to sharpen your abilities, gain more knowledge. And executive programs that we are launching are focused on practice, not on theory. If you want a qualification, go to TUT, UJ, VETS, and everywhere else. For executive education programs, even themselves, they will not give you a certificate. That is why people who do some of these business school courses, when they graduate there, there's no vice chancellor there. And so this is a different type of design of programs that are meant to assist you master the craft that you are involved in. So that's basically what we are trying to do here. Move away from focusing on a specific function. In the majority of cases that are dealing with the interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary in approach. Because when you are a CFO who does not understand the core business of your institution, you might make decisions that might have other impact. That is why you even see CFOs, just as one example, doing these type of programs so that they understand the pressure of other disciplines as well. So my time is up. Let me run through quickly. There's a video that will play as well. You can move here. You will share this thing with you. So, I mean, globally, this is the size. It's big. This thing is big of executive education. Globally, this is an estimate. These are people who do programs for non-degree purposes, but they are not just your typical short courses. And you'll see the examples now in the next slide. These are some of the people who are playing. So when you read newspapers and you see adverts, these are amongst those who are frequently advertising or inviting people. So that is why we brought them here. We didn't look at those who are private. It's estimated to be like that. So now here are these courses. There's an executive induction that we have. It's actually compulsory, DGs, DDGs, accounting officers and others. We're now inducting board members into our program. So if you've got public entities, you bring them onto this, including yourselves who represent your organization in a board of an entity of your department. In the next slide, there is a detail somewhere, I'm just showcasing. There's a coaching for leadership development. It's very important. There are 1 or 2 institutions in the country that are also competing with us in this regard. We've got a number of people who are trained as coaches who can provide the coaching. So if there's an employee in organization who wants a coach, a coaching program, we have that. Economic Governance School, just this coming Sunday, we are somewhere in Mulder's Drift with a number of local ministers from the African continent on this economic governance program. We can custom make this for your institutions as well. We've got an executive education program for senior officials in partnership with Mariana Mazzucato's University College London. We've got a program on SEAS, which was funded by the presidency when we're designing it, supported by OECD. We're inviting your people there. This one called Etela. If you come and do it, we will take you into a flight simulator in the north of Pretoria, where we'll ask you to look at your APP and look at the model of the flight plan and to estimate. The idea being, we want to inculcate the culture of precision planning in organizations. So as an accounting officer, you can plan as diligent as a captain of an aircraft. And the ethical leadership and oversight is meant for all newly elected members of the executive, those who hold office, whether you are MMC, mayor, MEC, minister, deputy minister. We also train those who are executives who support them as well. Now in 2023, colleagues from higher education, we will be doing these programs with yourselves. We finalize the scope. We'll discuss this with you at 2 o'clock because we want you to provide quotations for this. We have an IMDP program which is done by 5 universities. We are hoping that this could be done by all the institutions as well, so that people can go back into the sim, knowing that we've got a wide array of institutions that can provide the training in this regard. This, what you see here, exclude what we are already doing, as well as other courses that we will be going to you to do, which are not part of the executive education portfolio. These are the universities that we've got MOUs with, that we are working with at the moment, delivering a variety of programs. And so the new programs, some of the executive programs that we spoke about, we want to deliver them in partnership with these institutions because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can't afford to employ a scenario planner to teach and lead scenario planning, but working with these universities, we can have 4 or 5 or 6 or even all of them having a program on scenario planning in the public sector, which means anyone who wants to learn scenario planning can go through that program. Internationally, these are the partners. We're doing some of the programs with them, as I have mentioned, and we are continuing to grow this portfolio. We can facilitate that your colleagues can join one of these programs. You do know how to get hold of us. So basically, that is our story, colleagues. We are excited to have moved thus far as the NSG. We are hoping to move this into another level over the coming years. We are growing the brand. Please do become an ambassador of the NSG. Wear that cap and always remind people to learn, serve, and grow. So we're not learning just for credentials, but you are learning because you want to serve the public better, but you must also grow yourself as a professional and as a person who's serving in the public sector. Welcome to the new NSG. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal. You can see Principal is excited about executive education. It's even overrun his time. And if you didn't stop him, he would have still explained more to show the passion that he has for this. Just a reminder, the purpose of the executive education is to ensure that we enhance ethical leadership practices, governance, acumen of senior officials and executives in all spheres of government, public entities and organs of state. In doing that, we're coming up with these short programs that we're rolling out, and the master classes that principals also showed you. And one of the programs that we're doing is a program we deal with our partner, which will be our next speaker now, UCL. It is a program that is it's done virtually. So these are the different modalities that we use. Some of our programs will be face-to-face, some will be virtually, and also using the e-learning. This is how flexible the NSG is. And we use a variety of partners to deliver on these programs. We make sure that we use our own capacity as well as those of our partners who are leaders, experts in the field that we will be addressing, to make sure we give you the best in the field, best knowledge that you can be able, when you leave the training, you know that you've got the best out of it. So hence we have the professors that are there working with us as the NSG. We're gonna have online our speaker, Mr. Moritz Elhan from UCL, University of London, University College of London. He will be talking to us about the program that we partner with them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would you like me to go ahead? Hello. Nice to be part of this very exciting event. Let me first of all say I'm very privileged to attend today's event here, and not only see what the vision is that Professor Busani has just outlined, but also to have the opportunity, of course, to represent my own department here at the University College of London. For those of you who don't know, we have been working together with the NSG as part of executive education portfolios for over 2 years now. We've worked together with approximately 150 candidates across 3 cohorts, and we'll be working on a 4th cohort coming forward at the end of this year, I believe. So I've prepared for you a short presentation that I think very well complements Professor Busani's views and key outlines that he's just presented. But of course, my perspective is much more from a higher education institution that is, amongst many other competitors, very proactively establishing itself in this market. And of course, mind you, we are not a business school. So of course, there are various business schools, as we've just learned from Professor Busani, that are participating very actively in this very dynamic and attractive market. We are, of course, an organization that is much more focused on social sciences and political developments and so forth. Therefore, we have a slightly more particular position in this market as such. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. I hope that you will be able to see what I have prepared for you today. Please, unless I hear from you, I'm going to simply assume that everything is fine. So the topic that we will be just briefly talking about will be essentially discussing some established practice and, of course, forward-looking strategy in executive education. So as I said, I'll be offering you the viewpoint from an organization that is participating in this very exciting market. And of course, there's there are a variety of factors that we as an organization need to take into consideration in order for us to actually offer content that is relevant to you as executives and helps you, again, taking on Professor Busani's points on the key messages of the NSG, particularly this growing aspect of your career where we would like to be actively supporting you. So let me just outline the agenda for today's presentation. I'm going to briefly discuss with you the industry opportunities and trends that we have identified, once again, not from a business school point of view, but much more from a social sciences / political institution that we like to understand ourselves as. I will outline to you some of the key success factors. So some of you may not be familiar with this concept. It's essentially about determining what are the key elements in the sector, in the market, that drive success and that organizations that wish to partake in this market and this industry need to fulfill in order to attract the right kind of clientele that then will be able to maximize the benefits from participation, essentially. Then I'm going to briefly outline to you how this ties into our strategic approach. So essentially, how is our strategic approach built around these key success factors, and how do we take into consideration these key success factors when it comes to devising our strategic approach in the context of executive education offers. And of course, last but not least, I'm very delighted to also give you some further information on the collaboration with the fabulous colleagues at the National School of Government. As I said, I'm absolutely delighted to have been invited to this event. It's a great pleasure for me to offer our perspective on the current strategic challenges, but also on further opportunities to collaborate with the NSG. So again, our point of view on industry and opportunities and trends is now basically, I'm starting on a very high level. Where does executive education sit in this cycle of education? So if we picture education, of course, being the creator of opportunities for many people, being the creator of wealthy, prospering states, if you will, to some extent, where does executive education sit in this cycle, if you will? And so the way we understand the functionality of executive education offers is that it very strongly creates and widens partnership opportunities. So for example, I think the partnership that we have established with the NSG is a fabulous example of exactly this particular aspect. We have the opportunity as an institution to get access and to test our research, get access to organizations where our research is being practiced, and we can see how does it work in practice, how does it work in reality. Is there some things that we need to adjust in our theoretical work, in our background, that would help our theories to be applied much better in a more practical environment? So we have this as a sort of a litmus test, if you will, where we can see, does our research, do our case studies meet the actual demands of the industry, of the markets that we try to break into? Of course, they offer funding and scholarships through, of course, we generate revenue through our executive education. So Professor Busani outlined the market value, the market volume earlier on the previous slide. However, we do not consider this as a stream of revenue as such. Much more, we like to think of this as an opportunity to actually give back through scholarships and bursaries, etc. So through this executive education activity, we are able to build our portfolio of bursaries, scholarships, and enable essentially many more participants to partake in our educational offers, thereby once again reinforcing the purpose of education on a state level. And of course, last but not least, the overall impact is essentially what we're looking for, of course, and as a research organization. So executive education offers us exactly that opportunity. And you can see I've tried to kind of create a circle here, and all these points that I've just now mentioned will then inform and essentially offer us perspectives from firsthand perspective, how we can adjust and realign our offers to then match the current needs and industry demands in a better way. So essentially, if done properly, we're talking about a really nice circle and of constant development, again, aligning very well with one of the key elements of the NSG growing. And this also applies to us. We see where we work well, we have an opportunity to see where we can still build and where there's room for improvement. And it also offers us the opportunity to grow. So just a few key messages based on some very recent research by a very renowned higher education consulting agency here in the UK. Some of you may be familiar with Carrington Crisp. If you're not, I highly recommend that you engage with them. They have a vast array and a portfolio of knowledge, a lot of research lots of research happening in the field of higher education. And of course, they're particularly active as well in the field of executive education. And of course, I don't expect you to take in or read all of these points that I've outlined on this particular slide. However, I do want to highlight a few key elements. And again, once again, very well tying into what Professor Busani mentioned earlier. It's not about badges. It's not about qualifications anymore. So universities such as we are very much moving away from an environment where we talk about very strict, rigid degrees, bachelor's, master's, MBAs, and so forth. but we are essentially recognizing the zeitgeist, if you will, that is currently very much visible, especially after recovering from the COVID pandemic, where of course we had working from home and had much more access and much more a much more innovative approach to making learning accessible to participants. And therefore the trend, a very strong trend, and I believe irreversible trend, is that we're moving away from traditional qualifications, but much more to non-degree studies, bite-sized kind of certifications, short courses, and so forth. So I believe that the initiative of the NSG, but also by extension, the initiative by many of our competitors throughout the world, is the right one to offer not badges and traditional degrees anymore, simply because they're too rigid. They do not match the needs of the market anymore, but much more shift towards a more dynamic offering of short courses and so forth. And this is also reflected here. So many of the participants view diplomas and certificates as stepping stones towards a degree, but also they are simply the most preferred or most favored type of certification out there. So we're not talking about MBAs anymore. We're not talking about traditional master's degrees anymore. Much more, we're talking about certificates, diplomas, and so forth that really highlight the needs of a particular individual, or highlight or essentially very much cater to the specific needs of a particular individual, be it in a specialized field such as accounting, finance, or be it in a much more broader field such as leadership, which could be considered much more generalist in an approach. Now, of course, we have to, of course, always bear the factors or bear the pressures of the market. So we do realize that there are a lot of financial pressures on organizations globally. And of course, especially after the recovering from the COVID pandemic, cash is not as loose anymore. So 52% of respondents in this particular survey have mentioned actually that pricing of business schools can often be a deterrent for their participation. So this is something to bear in mind in an organization participating in this market. Nevertheless, we feel that this is very much compensated by the access that our participants gain to our alumni networks and also the networks within the cohort itself. So I'll get into this a little bit in a little bit more detail after. However, each cohort is, of course, comprised not only of one single department that then sends its delegates to our programs, but is often comprised of various departments across a nation, across various departments of a government, for example, such as our collaboration with the NSG. So we are essentially facilitating the opportunity for participants to not only engage with their peers, but also with peers across departments and also across functions within the government. So we're talking about finance, we're talking about planning, we're talking about planning on urban level, planning on much more national level, and so forth. So we are able to really bring together a variety of different perspectives here. This neatly takes me to the key success factors of the industry. So as I talked about, as we can establish essentially based on what I previously outlined, executive education resembles a key significant trend in current higher education. We're talking about a significant market value. So depending on which sources we use, we're talking about $30 to $40 billion. It depends again on how you define specifically this particular market. So we're talking either about executive education in a much more broader sense. We can talk about executive education in a much more narrow sense when we talk only about business schools, for example, and so forth. So it depends a little bit on how we determine this or how we define this. We at the IPP, we work with roughly $30 to $40 billion a year. And this is, of course, a highly attractive market to get into. And like I said, just to summarize the key points, there's a clear trend towards smaller bite-sized qualifications. It's not about mere credentials. The demand is somewhat price elastic. So that does mean that we have to take into consideration the pricing being one of the deterrents potentially. So we have to work with organizations to find a good solution there. And of course, and this is a very important point that I'm going to address later on in this brief presentation as well, participation or from the perspective of participants, participation in such programs is about tangible impact. So the NSG wants to see that its delegates that partake in our programs are able to benefit from tangible impact and also are able to create tangible impact when they return to their organization. And in fact, it's one of our quality management levers or systems to not only engage with participants shortly after the event, but also to really work on a long-term relationship to see, okay, after a year, has anything changed in the organization? Has anything that we've shared with you, conveyed to you as part of our programs, really made a sustainable difference in the organization? Because often, unlike with other programs, executive education can take some time to really bear its fruits, because of course we're talking about senior level changes, and this takes time to trickle down into the departments. However, after a year or sometimes even 2 years, we can then see that there's been significant change, and we really love to hear this kind of feedback from our organizations to see where we have managed to aid you or aid the organization in question to make these changes that they wanted to achieve. And so this takes me neatly to the next point. Of course, we want to, as an organization, very much understand who are the kind of people that come to us. So what are these people looking for? Because that significantly informs our content, but not only the content, also very much the didactical approach that we'd like to take. So are we talking about researchers? Are we talking about practitioners? Are we talking about a variety of these two groups? And of course, from an executive education point of view, or provider of executive education, it is really, really important to bear in mind that the clients that come to us may have had or access to university education 10, 20, some of them even 30 years ago. So an academic approach to things may not necessarily what they're looking for. They might much more want a more direct, more practical kind of approach to things. And we really need to take that into consideration. So from our point of view, it's really, really important to understand who are the typical executive education clients. And we find that they're typically very much selected mid-management members of the organizations. So up-and-comers, people that are promising, people that have qualified, partaking in lots of volunteer work, really showing what they can do. They are often selected, nominated by their organizations, and then sent to organizations such as ours to partake in these kind of programs. Mid-career, so those of you that are familiar with the United Nations pay grade, we're talking about P4, P5, so certainly diplomat status. But then, of course, also we very much enjoy working together with senior management. So that would be D1, D2, and of course, government officials such as the delegates that we've had the pleasure of working with from the NSG in the past. And also in terms of target group, market segments, if you will, we've identified two main types. So we're talking about leadership oriented, which would be the senior management, the directors, the people that are in charge of organizational culture, organizational change, leadership, vision, and so forth for the organization. But then also we're talking about the specialists, so the accountants, the people that make it happen on the ground, the mid-management staff that aspire towards senior positions, but that have a very particular field of expertise that they are currently engaged with. So those are the two main areas that we cater to. And one commonality we find across both of these groups is that both have a very strong desire for networking opportunities, as I outlined earlier, and also career development. And so one could reflect this graphically as sort of two circles, and the overlapping bit is career development and networking opportunities. However, of course, that leaves quite a big area, if you will, on both the left and the right side, where we have to fill content, leadership-oriented content, but also offer content to specialists. And this really is then taking me to the next slide, where we're talking about what are these individuals looking for? What are these organizations that send their individuals to us looking for? And at the top level, the leadership-oriented clientele typically is looking for dynamic capabilities, essentially a better understanding of how to develop these dynamic capabilities in organizations. So again, those of you that are unfamiliar with this terminology, essentially dynamic capabilities refers to organizational skills that allow it to adjust to new challenges and to maintain its core capabilities, but quickly adjust, be agile towards new challenges. Of course, COVID would have been a formidable example of exactly this. So I think Professor Busani, you addressed the need for learning, the need to suddenly engage with IT tools that may have been unfamiliar for many staff before. And it's exactly this that organizations are quickly adaptable and can adjust quickly to new challenges in their external environment. And of course, also organizational change ties in very well with that, visionary leadership, and essentially concepts beyond their silo. So when we're talking about leadership-oriented clientele, they're interested in making sure that they break out of their silo, they get new perspectives on culture, new perspectives on change, capabilities, leadership, and so forth, in order for them to have an opportunity to broaden their understanding of an organization. How does it work? What are the dynamics? What are the pitfalls? What are the dangers, and so forth? So in a nutshell and in summary, this kind of content is much more generalist and provides us with a challenge that we have to essentially package academic research in a practical, generalist toolkit for this leadership-oriented clientele, which is not always easy because each organization is, of course, different, has its own culture, its own history, its own individual or its own idiosyncratic challenges, if you will. So it's very challenging for us as an organization to come up with content that then enables or equips these leaders with content that they can actually apply. But I will get to that in a few slides down the line. And of course, the second market segment here, as I outlined, are the specialists, and they're very much looking out for practical toolkit. What is the cutting edge, or what is the current research in their field? Say, for example, green finance. What is the current research in just transition? What is the current research in sustainable development goals? Systems thinking, I saw on one of the slides Professor Busani had displayed earlier. So this is something that we're particularly active in. And in fact, as part of the last cohort that we had the pleasure to work with from the NSG, we actually offered a case study reflecting the application of sustainable development goals in a taxation context in a region in northern Spain. So it was a very nice opportunity for us to showcase how do these theories actually work in practice, and how can we offer leadership or how can we offer specialist content to an interested clientele and show exactly how does this theory pan out in practice in reality, and also essentially under conditions that can be very testing, because of course real life environments are much more dynamic, much more unforeseeable, and so this has worked really well, what I can see from the feedback that we've received. And so maybe just as a kind of, I always love to work with graphical kind of images on this, and I think what I'm trying to convey to you with this particular graph here is, if you take into consideration the leadership and the specialist content, we as an organization always have to balance out the breadth of the content, so the breadth of the audience essentially that we attract. So how specific is the content versus how broad is the content? And I think it is very much important for us to find the right kind of level of combination for organizations in particular. And what I would like to end this key success factors section with is essentially, what does this mean for us? And what are the practical, operational, strategic implications for us as an organization that we have to bear in mind when we create strategy? And I'll get to that in a moment, just show you how we go about the strategic process when we design this kind of content. But let me just summarize, of course, that all target groups expect excellent opportunities for career development and networking opportunities. Our teaching, as I outlined earlier, must be value-driven and based very much on the department's own capabilities and research strengths. So we have to make sure that the content that we create for you is something that we feel comfortable with and that we have ample experience in, to be able to make sure that we can convey to you some practical elements that you will then be able to actually apply and implement at your organizations. And of course, from a strategic point of view, from a competitive business point of view, our offers have to include valuable content. As I said, it's got to be something that is of value for you, but also, of course, in order for us to survive in this competitive environment, it has to be content that is hard to find, that is rather unique in the world out there, and also is hard to copy. So of course, we need to view this as a business venture, a business operation. So there's these particular factors that we believe make us stand out in the environment that we're currently competing in, and in fact offer us a considerable sustainable competitive advantage in this very competitive world out there. Now, just to give you an idea of how we would like to create our offers, taking into consideration the key success factors that I've outlined before. So we have a few elements that we like to think cater very well to these two, graphic representations, if you will, that I've offered you earlier. We offer, or we are going to offer later in this year, 2022, free content based on IIPP's key teaching pillars. So the free content is intended to prime future participants of executive education, but not only prime them, but also really offer an opportunity for participants that don't have the time, can't afford participation with us, to get an idea of where we see opportunities from our point of view in the field of executive education and where we like to focus on. Because, like I said at the very beginning, this isn't just about creating revenue, but it is very much also from our point of view as a higher education institution to give back to society and to allow access to our research and to make sure that people are actually able to benefit from this, be it through payable courses, but also if they wish to engage with us on a free basis, they're also able to do that. And then next in line are, of course, the open core modules. So if you look at the second image, this would be situated much more on the right side. So very broad audience, very sort of broad, capturing very broad elements of our teachings. And then the open specialization modules being much more on the top left, with a much more narrow cohorts, much more focused on particular skill sets, finance, tourism, healthcare, for example. Those would be some of the areas. And then, of course, the closed customized programs, which would be a perfect example here, the collaboration with the NSG, which really, because we're working with an organization as a whole, requires us to combine the aforementioned factors and really make sure that we don't only cater to generalists, don't only cater to specialists, but cater to a very broad segment of clients that come to us as part of the cohorts that you select. So just to give you an example, in prior cohorts, we had 60, sometimes 30 candidates coming to us, and looking at their backgrounds, they had different levels of education, different levels of salary, and also different levels of not only municipal, regional, or national level, but also completely a great variety of responsibilities coming from all sorts of different departments of your civil service, of your government. So it has been very interesting for us to see how our content is perceived. Now, just to give you a few specific examples. So, for example, the free content, of course, is based on our teaching pillars. It's asynchronous, it's on demand, so people have access to that at their own volition, if you will. The open core modules are going very much to the core of our research. So rethinking capitalism, we believe that some changes need to be made in societies, and the public sector is very much responsible for making these key changes, creating the right kind of environments. So this is where we see a broader audience requiring access to or potentially desiring access to our way of thinking, what we bring to the market. Mission bootcamps would be another course there. And then, of course, the specialization modules, digital transformation in government, which in fact we have an information session coming up not too far from today, in approximately 3 weeks. I will circulate that with the colleagues after this event, in case some of you are interested to partake in that. We have a systems thinking related portfolio for policymakers that really shows how is systems thinking relevant, but also what are the factors, the interdependencies, if you will, that must be taken into consideration when making policy. How does this affect positively, but potentially also negatively, other stakeholders in the equation? And then, of course, customized programs with organizations such as yourselves, but also the Peruvian government. We've worked with the Vatican through a previous engagements that we on a department level had with them. So it's all been very enriching for us as well. We feel that this is a very good opportunity for us to grow, as it is hopefully for our participants. And just to come back to how to position these various elements on the graph that I showed you earlier, when we come to custom design, custom programs like the one that we create for you, we try to sort of really factor in all these elements and make sure that we capture the the entirety of the possible bandwidth that we offer as part of our academic research and content. And now, of course, it's my pleasure to just briefly outline the collaboration with the NSG. So this is a screenshot earlier from late last year, in fact, where all the key stakeholders are united. So we have Professor Busani, we have Dr. Millie Pale, we of course have the academic lead Antonio Andreoni, we have a modest image of myself, but also we were very pleased to have, of course, Mariana Mazzucato on board for this opening event. And it was our great honor to even welcome Ayana Dlodlo, who back then was the Minister for Public Service and Administration. I think she's now moved on to a new role, but back then we were very, very honored to have her on board and contribute to her perspectives on how we approach this particular program, and it really set the stage for this program moving forward. And so some details on our collaboration so far. We've had so far 3 intakes of 30 to 60 candidates each since early 2021. There's a 4th intake that we've now planned already after successful delivery of the last one. So we've just concluded the last one. I believe it was approximately 3 weeks ago. We will host the award ceremony for the certifications in a couple of weeks as well. So it's really nice to kind of be part of this journey for so many candidates. We've hopefully created pleasant experiences for over 150 participants so far, and hopefully there will be many more to come as part of this very fruitful collaboration. And in fact, and this is something I was editing as Professor Busani was talking about the medium-term strategic frameworks of the current administration, and I think this is really, really nice to see that our offers, when it comes to creating this strategy from our point of view as an organization, of course, we have to make sure that it ties in well with your needs. And we're really delighted to say that our offers across the 7 weeks really tie in well with the priorities of your current administration. And so we work in green finance, we work in green transition, but of course, we also talk about industrial strategy policy, which aids the pillar of developmental state that Professor Busani outlined earlier, the dynamic capabilities that creates a dynamic, capable state moving forward, mission orientation, but also case studies on SDGs, which contributes to creating an ethical state. So what I'd like to convey to you here is that our offers are not just focusing on what we think is relevant, but we want to really make sure that our offers strike at the heart of what you think is relevant for your organizational development, for your administrative priorities. And we're really, really happy to make sure that the offers that we create that are situated on this image that I've outlined earlier, that I've shown to you earlier, really meet the needs of the current administration, meeting the medium-term strategic frameworks until 2024. So this is really, really exciting for us to be part of that. And in summary, we feel that our program offers insights from research perspectives, but thereby also factors in the practical needs of executives such as yourselves through incorporating policy lab sessions and also proactive exchange of knowledge. So we really try and not only focus on the academic side of things, but really also want to make sure that we offer you this practical toolkit, the hammer, the screwdriver, so you can get to work and actually implement the theory and really make these changes moving forward in your organization. And to basically top this off at the very end of each of these cohorts, we ask our participants to come up with an actual policy-making exercise where they're asked to work on a pressing issue and really take into consideration their learnings, really tie in all these factors together, take a systems thinking approach, make sure that their actions work not just on a micro level, but also on a macro level, thereby really ensuring their viability and potential for implementation. And then, of course, we talked about badges, and we talked about this not being about degrees and so on. But of course, we're at the end very pleased to also then issue certifications to our participants, highlighting what they have achieved over the past 7 weeks, what the key elements of their learnings were. So we feel that, of course, it is much more about the content, much more about the spirit that we wish to convey to you. Of course, we do want to offer some kind of token of appreciation and achievement for candidates, so that they can also feel this is something that they have achieved, and it's actually, it's recognized by the School of Government in South Africa, but also is recognized by one of the leading organizations in the world, University College London, and its Institute for Innovation of Public Purpose. So there we go. It's been really exciting to work with you over the past years, and work with you on the fourth intake now moving forward. So of course, this takes me to the end of my contribution today. Once again, I'd like to really thank the colleagues at the NSG for thinking of us as one of the institutions that have the privilege to present to you today. We look forward very much to collaborating with the NSG again soon. We look forward to creating excellent academic experiences for you, working with you, and contributing to your journey, helping you grow. Of course, you're very welcome to approach me if you'd like to. You have my email address that you are very welcome to use for any queries that you may have. And that only leaves me to thank you very much, and wish you a very pleasant event with many other exciting programs. I have no doubt that the colleagues of the NSG will have in store for you. So thank you very much once again from my end.
Thank you so much, Maritz. It was very informative, and I like how you showcase our collaboration and how the program works for our students. It takes the context of South Africa, so it's not looking at other countries only, but it does focus and makes it relevant to us. So we are looking to have the fourth cohort, which our National Treasury is also sponsoring, but they're looking at provincial departments, senior management from there. So those that fall under that, may they please make sure they are in contact with us so that we can link them up. So maybe they can be able to access the sponsored slots as well. But other departments as well are welcome to register for that course. Moving on to the next item on our agenda is a preview of the NSG Executive Education Portfolio. We've prepared a video to showcase these programs with testimonials for those that have participated in the programs. Professor Melipaile cannot be with us. She's not feeling well. She's online, but we do have the video that she was gonna project for us. So get our technical system to play the video for us. Thank you.
To the launch of the National School of Government Executive Education Program. We are excited as the National School of Government to have reached this milestone of designing and deploying executive education program, which is very key in the broader agenda of building capacity of the state. Executive education programs across the world are very unique in the sense that they bring to the fore people who already have qualifications and some experience. However, people who require particular knowledge and skills in order to assist them to master the arts of their craft. In this instance, we are not in the sense of executive education courses in order to assist public servants, some of whom already have qualifications to master the practice and their craft in the various disciplines within the public service. In the private sector, people do go through executive education programs in order to advance their knowledge and to sharpen their skills. For those who do not have qualifications but have got experience, executive education programs serve as a useful bridge which builds their confidence, enhances their skills, and they can then after pursue formal education programs, having understood what it means to go through a formal learning program. Of course, this has been made possible by the partnership we have first with the European Union, which has assisted us to design some of the courses that we are launching today, and those will be launching in the next few months. And indeed, our partnership with higher education institutions who are bringing a depth of expertise and experience in this area of executive education. It is not only a preserve of the private sector or business schools anymore, but increasingly in South Africa and beyond, we see executive education courses being launched, which is a series of short-term courses that could range from a week to 3 weeks up to 3 months in some instances, which are very crucial in order to recalibrate and get those who are serving the public to get access to cutting-edge knowledge and skills in order for them to serve South Africans better. We are excited as NSG to have reached this milestone, and we look forward to having many of you join some of our executive education programs. We are hoping to bring cutting-edge knowledge and skills into the public sector for all officials who are elected and those who are appointed, in order for them to learn, serve, and grow as professionals in the public sector. Thank you.
It's really a privilege once more to have amongst us subject matter specialists, experienced scholars in their subject discipline on matters that have been actually raised from yourselves throughout the various modules, and especially this last one, when we're talking matters leadership, professionalization, cultivating talent, but the preceding ones as well on strategy and related issues.
The Executive Induction Program. The Executive Induction Program, also known as the EIP, was launched in 2017. It seeks to induct newly appointed heads of departments to better serve the citizens of South Africa through exemplary leadership, and to perform in a way that contributes to real value creation within their departments and across government. The program is about building a capable and committed public service cadre with the necessary knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes to do their job. The EIP is intended for Directors General and Deputy Directors General. Adalla, which means lead in Sesotho, is an invitation to the executive leadership of public administration institutions. Heads of departments in the public sector understand that they are required to fulfill the administrative leadership role as executives who are conscious of the environment, can empathize and plan creatively, execute diligently and prudently, and account ethically to stakeholders and authorities. Adalla is intended to draw out the wisdom of participants to fully espouse the service ethos and accomplish their leadership tasks in institutions, portfolios, and multi-sector networks.
So then, thank you for the opportunity. We, as the University of Johannesburg, are excited to be part of this initiative. Colleagues, as we always say in these sessions, we see these interactions as the beginning of the conversation in and around the fourth industrial revolution. So the role it plays, how technologies associated with it can be deployed in government, and how does it begin to assist the state agencies in service delivery enhancement?
I do believe that a good civil servant, a public servant, is the one that has got appetite for self-improvement. I just want to reflect some words on leadership. And this is not my words. To lead is to live dangerously, because when leadership comes, when you lead people through difficult change, you challenge what people hold dear, their daily habits, tools, loyalties, and ways of thinking. And then for me to actually, I believe that what you do and how you signal is actually more powerful and more effective than the pep talks and what you say in meetings with your team.
My name is Tandera Kamile. I am the CEO of Inkosi Outreach in the Central Hospital in 11 days ahead. I am here attending the Edela course at the National School of Government. The 2 days have been really good days where I have actually learned a lot and relearned some of the things that I am already doing. I love the fact that you are sharing experiences with the colleagues. I am looking forward to the next 3 months and the rest of the module. We are already
Good afternoon. My name is Ramasitele Jacqueline myself. I'm the head of department of agriculture in Limpopo province. I came here yesterday to attend this NSG program for the officers, which in my view, I think it's a step in the right direction. We needed to continually refresh our knowledge, our understanding in terms of our role as accounting officers.
As we have said before, we have to master statecraft, and going through learning engagements like these ones are meant to assist us master aircraft so that there's a diligent management and application of public resources, so that even as we experience the worst situations like these ones, we'll still be able to learn.
The Executive Education Program for South African Senior Government Officials in partnership with the University College London. The program is targeted at both executive managers and members of the executive across the public sector and organs of state who wish to receive training on the key theories and practical aspects of building an entrepreneurial state led by ethical, capable, and innovative public sector leaders.
You know, we're living in a period where finally people talk about not just growth for growth's sake, but the need to redirect it, to build back better, to transform, to have structural change. In places like South Africa, this is huge. I have the honor to be on the President's Economic Advisory Committee, along with others. It's a wonderful group, but in the end, as we all know, it's easy to blah, blah, blah. What does it actually mean to implement new structures, new types of institutions, new types of public-private partnerships, which allow us and help us to steer an economy in a completely new direction. Institute's goal is really, this whole issue of putting public value and public purpose at the center of the economy. And to steer growth. So it's more innovation-led, sustainable, and inclusive. But the thing I guess I'm most proud of that the Institute is doing, and it's hard, so it's not like we're perfect, is this idea of practice-based theorizing. So we might have great ideas around, say, patient long-term finance, or issues that I'll talk about today in a second around missions and public purpose. But when you then try to do it on the ground, with the examples I just gave of redesigning a public bank around public purpose, you learn how difficult it is. You start asking different types of questions, which open a can of worms. And we try to bring those questions and that experience back to the theory. So that kind of constant feedback between practice and theory, but also then to the curriculum. This kind of opportunity we have talking to you through this exec ed program, which Moritz runs so brilliantly, is all about how can we actually reflect new thinking and the way we train and educate civil servants and bureaucrats globally. So the word bureaucratic eventually becomes a positive word.
The Economic Governance School. The Economic Governance School for members of the executive is a seasonal initiative aimed at ministers, deputy ministers, premiers, members of executive councils, mayors, and
right up to the system, society, private classes, and therefore the need of the state entity in the superstructure or referred to as the state. And what's nature of invitation said I'm speaking for 20 minutes, I'm not going to dwell on these issues. But I thought as a starting point, we should try and problematize the relationship between government and the state. The relationship between government and the state.
I'm here in the NSG, the National School of Government, where we've been having a program on economic governance at an executive level, which comprise national ministers, deputy ministers, mayors, members of the provincial executive. Actually, the course has been very important because it enabled us as the leadership of the state to reflect on what are the challenges that we are faced with in terms of economic governance, but also how we can be able to come up with possible solutions for interventions in dealing with those challenges that we see. Obviously, following the presentation by President on economic recovery, one of the important things is the financing of that plan. So the presentation by the various scholars that were with us today were very helpful in enabling us to see how we can best navigate some of the challenges that we think are there that may hinder us in achieving the economic recovery. It's such an honor for me to have had the opportunity to participate in this exercise. I've got to say that it's been mind-blowing, extremely informative, wow, in a sense, quite refreshing in a sense that you come across such a very heavy insights that help us to comprehend with the challenges that government as a whole is confronted with. The key things for me that I really am taking out of it is firstly appreciating the complexities of the world, how the nations in the world relate first to their internal matters, but also how they relate to each other.
I'm here at the National School of Governance. I've learned a lot about the economy and governance. Taking home, I'm going to make sure that some of the strategies that should be implemented by local government are implemented. I'm quite happy to have learned and refreshed some of the key economic concepts as they were alluded to by various panel. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Parliament School. Thank you.
Ethical Leadership and Executive Oversight Program. Designed as an intensive learning intervention, the Ethical Leadership and Executive Oversight Program is intended for ministers, deputy ministers, premiers, MECs, mayors, and MMCs. It is curated to assist members of the executive to deal with and manage the varied ethical and leadership challenges. It aims to promote a culture of effective oversight and ethical leadership as envisaged in the Constitution, the Executive Ethics Code, the PFMA, the MFMA, and other relevant prescripts.
We invited the National School of Government to join us here with the intention to equip the leadership, the newly elected leadership of Buffalo City Metropolitan Municipality with the knowledge in relation to the executive role of the mayoral committee, in particular on the issues related to governance and what is expected of the political leadership in particular and the mayoral committee in general. So far, the process is going smooth. We have received a number of presentations from various organs of state on issues of on the state of infrastructure and other related issues. So we are here. This is very important, in particular for the newly elected leadership, so that as we start the term, we are all equal in terms of what needs to be done in taking forward the obligations that are placed on us by the Constitution as the municipality.
For me, this workshop made me think out of the box. It made me look at our challenges from a different worldview. We've always looked at things very clinically and critically. Here, we were given pointers as to look at things from a different view. The analogy that our facilitator brought in as as a pilot flying an airplane and having to make split-second decisions. We have to do that all the time. And there's never a right or a wrong decision. But at the end of the day, your decision needs to be based on what is best for the community within your whole concept of compliance. And the same for ethical leadership. What is ethical leadership? And I think that is where we really had some time to reflect. What kind of leaders are we, and what do we want to see happen in 5 years' time? You know, what we do today, you will have your result in 5 years' time.
I have attended the mayoral induction.
Hi, colleagues. Sorry, the video is long, but it showcases, and you can see from the people that are sharing their experience from attending the courses that you really benefit or your principals will really benefit if they attend those courses. We are at the last part of our program where we need to acknowledge our partners and our sponsors for the programs that you've just heard about. So we'll talk to some of the programs. We've already heard about the executive induction. That one is done purely by the NSG with support of some structures outside facilitators. We also talked to the ETELA, it's delivered by NSG staff, with also assisted by other experts that we bring into the course. We want to acknowledge our sponsorships for the executive education program for SA senior officials, the one we do it in partnership with the University College of London. our partners that have sponsored the program and made it more affordable for South Africans to attend this course. We had in 2021 for the first cohort of British High Commission. We also had Old Mutual that sponsored cohort 1 and 2 of 2021. We have Anglo-American that has sponsored the cohorts from 2021, even for this year. They're still a continuing sponsor for that program. As well, we have National Treasury that is sponsoring this course for this provincial leaders in the provincial departments. They've sponsored since 2021, and the last one that we said we'll have later in this year, they will still be sponsoring. For the Economic Governance School, we want to acknowledge EU for sponsoring the development of the program, and as well as the first cohort that we rolled out. We also want to acknowledge Anglo-American. They also was funding this one. And for this one that is starting on Sunday, the cohort 3 that is starting on Sunday, we have Anglo-American being a sponsor. We have Nedbank offering their venue for the training. We also want to acknowledge Metrofile as well as Imperial Logistics that will also be funding part of those programs for us. Those are the sponsors, and we want to thank them for making this easier for us and providing the sponsorship. We know that EU is still sponsoring some of the development of the programs that are upcoming. We thank them for being our sponsor throughout these years that they've been with us. Thank you so much for attending this launch. We're grateful that you were here with us, and we hope that you've learned something about the NSG, and you are also excited about the programs, and you will continue supporting us. Thank you very much. Lunch will be served now. Thank you.